our second speaker is Damien Nicolau. Damien is Project Manager for Digitisation and Collection Management at the Wellcome Library. And he is currently managing the digitisation of early European books and Chemist and Druggist, the latter of which he is going to speak to us about today.
Okay then, so just apologise in advance if any of you get motion sickness from this presentation. Like Valia, I've also had my share of nightmares about periodicals in the past, coming from quite a different direction though. In a former life, my thing was the retrieval and reprographics of said titles. In fact, I recognise many faces, names, and probably handwriting from request slips for many of those nightmares, so thank you for those. So then I was trying to deal with the quirks of particularly 19th century actually periodicals from that aspect. Now it's trying to deal with the quirks that derail digitisation projects, which kind of seem to affect systems and humans alike. So first of all, what I'm going to say is Chemist and Druggist, as far as I'm aware, is probably one of the worst examples of these. I'm sure there are worse that probably went out of business much sooner, but Chemist and Druggist has some very evil twists and turns. Anyway, so as you can see, we signed a deal with the publishers of Chemist and Druggist, that's UBM, to digitise the entire run of Chemist and Druggist from its inception in 1859. Oops, sorry. Inception 1859 to 2010, which we just chose as an arbitrary, neat cut-off point. Okay, so as context, I'm just going to skip through this because I'm sure you all either know or don't care. The Wellcome Trust does many things. What we're interested in here clearly is the medical humanities and exploring medicine in historical and cultural contexts, which is where the Wellcome Collection fits in. And as you can see, the Wellcome Collection does many things, one of which now is it includes the Wellcome Library, which I'm sure many of you have visited. So library is one of the world's major resources for study of medical history, which is where Chemist and Druggist fits in, and has quite a wide range of different materials of all ages and types. Right, so some years ago, probably about 5 years ago now, the library started a transformation strategy. So what it wanted to do was to engage new audiences and to embark on a strategic digitisation programme, giving global access to our collections online. And in that period, we have spent a lot of money and digitised many, many things. There was one glaring absence though, and that was any kind of journal or periodical digitisation. So, back to Chemist and Druggist. It started out as a monthly trade journal, then became weekly for retail pharmacists, and it was founded by the Morgan brothers, who are sitting very prettily in that picture there, and it's been published continuously ever since. Now, there are approximately just over 500,000 pages spread over those 150 years, so it's quite a substantial beast. And the editorial content is very varied, ranging from things, as you can see, from industry product news to profiles of prominent chemists and druggists, Chemist and Druggist Ball, campaigns against whatever the government was doing, especially against the NHS. They seem to be particularly aggrieved. Whatever you can think of, it found its way in those pages. So, as I said, we've done a lot of digitisation and nothing of journals, serials, periodicals, and there was a reason for that, and that's because it was difficult. So that tapping into what Thalia said earlier is often a black hole in a lot of what you find online. However, it was decided that just because it was difficult, it really didn't excuse not doing it. So not only did we decide to do a difficult thing, we decided to find a nice difficult exemplar of the difficult thing just to make it extra fun. So of these kind of 6.5 kilometres of journals that we have on many, many subjects, we chose Chemist and Druggist. And we had a certain process, so it was not peer reviewed. Therefore, most other digitisation programs wouldn't touch it. It was very rich in advertising and images, which hold a lot of value in themselves and certainly have a lot of appeal to non-traditional audiences. It's one of our most requested journals. We had some very strong endorsements from academics who'd use it. Tilly Tansey, for example, Laurel Brake, who couldn't express strongly enough how much value it had, mainly because of its diversity of coverage, which, as I say there, facilitates a lot of research into pretty much anything you could imagine. And one of the nice things about it is it was a very good way of tracking people and brands, companies over time. So you could see from the first time that rumours of a new drug are being reported to its patent period, the adverts start appearing. If it was welcome, often some court cases for people who are trying to knock it off, then it becomes kind of a generic thing, and then it fades out of favour. So you could see this over time, the debate and the trajectory, the lifespan of many of these things. So we had some aims at the start of the project, which are obviously to fill that very glaring omission of a journal, to provide it freely to everyone, because a lot of digitisation doesn't do that, and to eventually be able to host it ourselves, which took quite a lot of systems work, so that wasn't something we could do first of all. So there's an example. I'm afraid this is an early 20th century rather than 19th century example of a wonderful asthma cure, which you just need to roll up and smoke, and you would have instant relief from your asthma. I don't know if that was instant because you would immediately die or something else, but so what I'm going to compare is using the print Chemist and Druggist, which if any of you have come into contact with, and it has been bound in different ways, but it's quite a hefty thing often. It's really physically demanding to use. The volumes are heavy. They can weigh easily over a stone each. With 2 volumes a year, five volumes, 5 years of Chemist and Druggist is, it's as much as I weigh, which is, a bit of a limiting factor for its usage. Another thing, the standard of indexing when it's present in Chemist and Druggist is uneven, to say the least. And it's badly bound and often fragile. When I say badly bound, I mean both the order, sometimes the orientation of the issues that are bound is really quite unpredictable. And the other thing at the Wellcome Library is we had an incomplete set. We had a very good run, but it was incomplete. And there's an example. That's a couple of years of Chemist and Druggist sitting on the shelf there waiting for someone to need to visit an osteopath afterwards. Okay, so as we're preparing for the digitisation, we needed to choose a digitisation partner because it was going to be, being a 500,000 page title, quite a large undertaking, so it's a mass digitisation thing. We chose Internet Archive because they could do the end-to-end process and host it and keep the files up to date thereafter, which is another thing that's quite important. They weren't just going to step away and leave. They go through everything they digitise and bring it up to date so it doesn't become obsolete and unreadable, as well as producing OCR to a decent standard and offering it in many formats, which we could then, when we got our systems in place, harvest at will. Another thing we had to do is we had to go through every issue we had and note down all its kind of details, usually, again, inconsistent of dates published, volumes issued. I mean, they did at one point go 6 years without noticing that they'd got the volume number wrong for 6 consecutive years, and then they suddenly realised they could change it. So it was quite we had developers in Germany who work on one of our back-end systems that goes behind what you see on our site, and they had to have many long and detailed conversations with us to try and understand what kind of logic they were dealing with, and eventually we just abandoned the logic and said, look, we'll just give you a number that we've made up and just go by that and don't worry about anything else. So again, we also produced, as you can imagine, specifications for technical image standards, etc., and the metadata, and we got input from many stakeholders, again, all coming from slightly different ideological points of view, who didn't always agree, so that was quite a long process. But, there we go, some lovely Hazline cream, again from the First World War period, which would protect the roughened hands of ladies who were making weapons of mass destruction. Okay, so as I mentioned before, our library set was incomplete. The publisher very kindly, once we'd finished the contract negotiations, donated their set for destructive scanning. We didn't actually destroy it, but we could have if we wanted. Unfortunately, they didn't know what they had, as they'd left it in a kind of dingy warehouse next to a river that tended to overflow every now and then, and ignored it for the best part of 20 years. But we went through all that, and it really wasn't in bad shape, so that was good. And we also tried to find some other solutions for those missing years. So Boots kindly sent us some missing years from the 19th century, and the National Library of Wales wouldn't send us anything, but they would scan it for us, which again was quite a painful process. But now we have a nearly complete run of Chemist and Druggist. There are some gaps, but very few. We may fill them in later years, but probably not. Okay, so there were quite a lot of challenges with this project. One of them was that the publisher took well over a year, maybe even 18 months, to sign the contract. That was after the kind of legal bickering between our lawyers and their lawyers, and that's because they were subject to a takeover bid, and they were splitting their company up in various directions, and they just couldn't sign anything if they didn't have the authority. So that was one thing that if you are considering a partnership with a publisher, it's quite likely to happen, because really they're concerned with commercial things, and if they get taken over by a company that has a different commercial outlook to they had originally, it can all very quickly fall through, as it very nearly did. Another thing is archive.org, which is Internet Archive's website. It's built for monographs, it's built for single items. When you try and use journals within it, it's almost unusable. You just get a list, which, if we have enough time, I might show you. It's very fascinating, of things that all look the same, just page after page after page. So we knew that we would have to do some systems development to be able to handle that, and to handle all the errors and the complex structure of Chemist and Druggist. So to that end, we produced lots of project plans and Gantt charts, various things, which very quickly became completely ridiculous. So those. There were a lot of physical challenges in digitisation, as well as the usage for our readers. So the huge variation in sizes and bindings of these books was something which kind of threw out some of the normal digitisation practices that Internet Archive would employ. A lot of them were very tightly bound and even glued at the gutter, to the extent that you just couldn't separate the pages without ripping them. Even the conservators had to give up. And we had at one point considered, in the destructive digitisation mode, either disbinding or actually chopping the books to try and be able to digitise them. That would have made no difference. They said we would have lost the same amount, if not more, text. So that was abandoned. Again, as I said before, the binding order was quite eccentric, many misprinted dates and issue numbers and all sorts of things, and it's still very heavy for the scanning staff, who some of them really did struggle just to manipulate these things without either damaging the books or themselves. And some of them were so thick that the camera couldn't even focus. Luckily though, because we did have the two sets, sometimes where one of the publisher's books was particularly fat, we had the same thing divided to, say, 4 parts. So there was another way of getting around it. And the paper, some of them, all you need to do is touch it and it would just crumble in your hands. And to be fair to Internet Archive, they were incredibly sensitive to that, and they were probably more loath to damage anything than we were. We almost had to encourage them to just give it a try. So there's an example of some of the incarnations of Chemist and Druggist over the years, and that's one of those nice glued in binding jobs, and that's one of those on the Internet Archive scanner. So as you can see, not the easiest thing necessarily to get a good image from. Okay, so the project is largely complete now, and most of the functionality is in place. So what you can do now, as you can see, you can download a whole issue, either OCR or PDF. You can get pages as JPEGs. You can bookmark them and come back to them and view your little gallery if you want. You can zoom in and out and rotate as you'd expect. And you can search issues, browse by date, volume, thumbnail, do the usual social media sharing, and embed things into, say, if you've got a blog or something. It's very nice. Another thing you can do is you can access all our existing holdings and all the stuff that we've got from the other stream. So you do have access to more than we had before digitisation. Sadly, what we still have to do is find a way to be able to search across the entire resource, which for me is the key thing which makes it useful. At the moment, the sheer bulk of it is making our discovery system fall over. It can't index it. The developers are working on it, but they're struggling, so we don't have a date when that will happen. But it's something that we're keeping in mind for all subsequent journals, because it's really what makes a digital one special, isn't it? Right, so here's an example of a not particularly well-coordinated person looking at the OCR file that's been output from Chemist and Druggist there. So you can just take that, you can grab it, you can probably find an automated way to dump it all together and do some text mining. We haven't done anything like that yet. We'd probably like to, but there are also other competing demands on our resources. All right. So this is going to show some searching. It'll bring up some results, which you can just flick back and forth. So I'm sure you've seen similar things, probably on Google Books by now. Internet Archive have similar as well. Most of the technology is quite similar. One of the things, the development work we did here, it's open source, and now the British Library are also buying in, and they're going to develop a universal viewer from this. So that's one good thing. It's not come out of this project in particular, just out of our digitisation programme. So here we see a lovely thing from late 19th century Chemist and Druggist, where they found someone dead who had been using some dodgy medicine that would never have been prescribed by a pharmacist, it said. So that was their priority news there, that you shouldn't use opium and acetic acid when you're ill. Okay, so we'll skip away from that, as fascinating as it is, time is pressing. This is an example of what it looks like what it looked like at the time, and their website has improved. So this is how it looks when you find Chemist and Druggist on the Internet Archive website. It's millions of records that all look the same, with some kind of hypnotic moving images of the content. Okay, so already people have been using Chemist and Druggist. We haven't really started promoting it yet. Internet Archive have been harvesting images from Chemist and Druggist and putting them into Flickr. They come with the preceding 500 and following 500 words of text from the OCR, so that provides an interesting kind of search which you can kind of hit from Google. Lipsil have been using it to construct a timeline of their product, and somehow 567,000 views of Chemist and Druggists have just happened. No one quite knows how, because Internet Archive don't keep those kinds of statistics because they don't want to pry, but it's been suggested it might just because the word drug appears in it, but we don't know. Okay, here's a nice 19th century advert for Constitution balls. So very important, because there was an animal element to Chemist and Druggist as well at that point, which faded away as it went on in its lifespan. What next at Chemist and Druggist? We're proposing some themed, kind of curated content packages to kind of deliver to the kind of what we call the curious public and the media. So we might say pull from Chemist and Druggist some particularly interesting sets of images, adverts, articles, put them together and send them to people so they can hopefully produce some interesting content from them. We're going to be working with Wikimedia to use content from Chemist and Druggist to I suppose to back up some of the things that might be in some of the Wikipedia articles, just to add a little bit of extra authenticity to them. The usual kind of discussion lists, blogs, etc. And it's been brought under the umbrella of the MHL, UK MHL project, which I'm sure you're aware of. That's a big 19th century digitisation. So that kind of adds a little bit more crossover. So when people are looking for their 19th century monographs, they'll also find Chemist and Druggist. What we're hoping, maybe, budget allowing, to add value to what we've got is maybe to be able to get visualizations of perhaps frequencies of words over time in Chemist and Druggist, which I think is something that's always interesting. And in-house, they want to construct a Twitter bot which will basically churn out images from Chemist and Druggist with witty texts for the kind of the lay audience. We're going to be now we've spent so much time and money getting all our workflows, etc. Right, now we can actually understand what we're doing a little bit more. We're going to be doing more journals over the coming years. as you can see, our selection criteria are the exact selection criteria that Thalia mentioned, which cause the same titles and black holes to kind of always appear. But we're hoping to, to at least make the attempt to do the copyright clearance and stuff. But 95% of our journals sit on the shelves and never used, so the ones we can digitise will be the ones that come off the shelves sometimes. That's our starting point. And just to end, really what we'd like to know is what you'd like from Chemist and Druggist or from our future journal digitisation. There's a short survey there. I assume these get sent out after. Oh, I think, yeah. So, it'd be lovely if you have used Chemist and Druggist, if you fill it in. If you haven't, have a look at it, maybe fill it in afterwards. We're also interested to know what types of research people think they might be able to do from Chemist and Druggist, because obviously it's from a pharmaceutical angle, but it does touch upon history of advertising, publishing. You can see a lot of colonial things, in a certain period there's kind of always news from Australia, from India, from America, and a lot of kind of things around contraception which tell you about the way society is moving. So there are a lot of things that we thought of, that other people have thought of, but I'm sure there's many more that we haven't even contemplated. So that is that. Thank you.